Hello readers and writers, I'm MJ and today we're doing my January wrap-up. In January, I read a total of 13 books, but this does not include the 6 books that I ended up DNFing in January. So, including those, it's 19 books total. So these are 19 books that counted towards the Read What You Want challenge. I read mostly smaller books in January. 54% of them were under 300 pages. 38% were between 300 and 499 pages, and 8%, or only one, was greater than 500 pages. I do think this is definitely influenced by me wanting to finish the Read What You Own challenge, because this is not how I want to approach reading in general, by just focusing on length and shorter books. Not that books necessarily need to be longer, I just don't want to leave the longer books sitting on my shelf because of their length. I also read 100% fiction books in January. This is also not ideal for my reading perspectives. I love nonfiction books. And I have some good shorter nonfiction books in audio, but I was so focused on my paper shelves, I was so focused on my paper books, even though like the whole point of January was for me to participate in a reading challenge that focused on ebooks. My mind did not switch over. It was trying to really get down my physical TBR shelves. And I focused entirely on fiction. Again, not something I want to continue with, and I'm already happy to say that, like, even in the little bit of February that has happened, that I'm reading a lot more nonfiction already. Genre-wise, I read a lot of fantasy this month. 11 of the books were fantasy. Partly this is because the Ursula K. Le Guin series that I'm reading is fantasy, and partly because this is a lot of what I have on my shelves. I was working on clearing out a lot of the YA fantasy that I have accumulated over the years and just let sit there. So it's good that I'm making progress on that, but also science fiction's actually my favorite genre, so I think that helped contribute to January not actually being as great a reading month as I would have wanted it to be. So in total, I read 2,919 pages, which is not horrible, and I listened to 22.62 hours. I, again, had 69% of what I read be my physical TBR, only 15% being digital, despite January me participating or trying to participate in an ebook TBR challenge, and then 50% audiobook. And I think this is part of the reason why I'm just kind of wanting to be done with the Read What You Own challenge. It's been great. It's helped me clear off a lot of shelves, but mentally, I think I'm just over it, and it's kind of putting me in a reading slump. Hence the 6 DNF books that I had in January. So I'm going to go through what I read, starting at what I read first to what I read last, and then at the end I'll go over the books that I DNF'd. So the first book I finished is These Bright Things, and I was really excited about this book. It was on my want to read radar before Rainbow Crate ever announced that it was going to be their book selection, and when it was, I was really excited. So I wanted to pick this up. It is a queer science fiction with a Jewish main character, and it's different enough, and the blurb was exciting enough that I wanted to pick it up. And unfortunately, I just didn't enjoy this. I wanted to. It's about characters that have sparks, and it's a historical science fiction, so these sparks develop around World War One. And then it deals a lot with like discrimination based upon the sparks, and I just think there's so much that the author could have done with this novel, specifically in regards to Jewish history. So it talks about World War One and the trauma of war, and then kind of hints at World War Two, but especially considering any book that talks about seeing World War II and barely like hints at Jewish, like the Jewish experience during that, like the Holocaust, like these concentration camps and all the horrendous things that happened during that war. But to have a Jewish-centric book with a Jewish main character that kind of just glossed over all of that, it was extremely, almost like uncomfortable as a reader, because it seemed it seemed unfair to everyone who had suffered during that period and who was part of that Holocaust. And I would feel the same for any horrendous period in history, especially when the book is focused on that and the experience of that. And it just was overshadowed by this other villain in the book, and it just didn't need the other villain. It was just too much. It was too much darkness, and it wasn't necessarily supposed to be about darkness. It was supposed to be about, I think, the light and the darkness, but there was just too much. Too many bad people, too many bad things happening, and it just didn't allow a narrative arc to any of it, and then it just ended, and I felt uncomfortable and unsatisfied as a reader. So I'm really, really sad that I didn't love this like I expected it to. I did finish it though, so there's that. Part of the reason why I also read so many physical books is because in December my kid had did a Read What You Own advent calendar where they went and shopped my TBR shelves and wrapped up presents for me, and I unwrapped a book every single day, and it was such an amazing experience. It was so much fun to connect them to my love of reading and to like see books as presents that I already own without having to like have the stress of having even more books added to my TBR. So it was a great experience, but I also wanted to read I wouldn't say all of them because there's still one I haven't picked up yet, but to read the majority of those. So that did direct a lot of my reading in January as well. And one of those books is The Haunted Bookshop. And this is a light novel, so it's light manga, but in narrative form completely. There's very little pictures in it. And I was excited to pick up this novel because it actually was a gift from my son, and then to have my youngest also pick it to read, and they and honestly everyone in my life is such a huge anime and manga fan, and it isn't exactly something I enjoy, which I don't understand, because I have the personality type for it, but I think it just gets over dramatized for me, and I just don't enjoy that. And unfortunately, The Haunted Bookshop had everything I didn't enjoy about anime in a novel form. It was just overly dramatic, and I could picture like the anime happening in my head as it was written. Like it may have been an anime. I am picking up more mangas, and so I don't want to say that I universally don't like manga, because I'm coming to appreciate it, but specifically for The Haunted Bookshop, it was just a little too over dramatized for my taste. But you have, and too little bookshop, I should say. I think if there was more bookshop, or it focused more around the actual bookshop, I would have probably enjoyed it more, because the bookshop itself is pretty cool. But what we do is we follow a human who got dropped into the spirit world as an infant, so she was raised by spirit, and then a young man also goes into the spirit world. And so our female character, who's our main character, is about 23 years old, and the young man that gets dropped in is about 17, so age gap. At like an awkward time too. Like, those are awkward ages. If they were older, it wouldn't be as weird, but at that age, that's such a uncomfortable age gap, in my opinion. And then like the guy has to sit and learn how to navigate the spirit world, because we find out that he's actually like a spirit hunter. I put this book down like 4 times before finally finishing it. It was very hard for me to get into, but once I did finish it, like, it was easier to read once I just like committed to finishing it. My kid would not let me DNF it, which is valid, but I also not going to go on to the second volume. They might read it though, because I think they would enjoy it, but we will see if that happens. And then kind of this experience with manga, I read volumes 2 of My Hero Academia. This is my kids' favorite anime, and I had told them that anything that they read, I will read after them, as a way of like kind of encouraging them to read, because they don't prefer reading. But also as a way to kind of expand what I am reading as well, and a way for us to share reading. So I read volume 2 of My Hero Academia. This one specifically I don't really think I enjoyed. I read a few other volumes, so I'm trying to remember where I actually switched to enjoying it. Yeah, but not this one. I mean, I guess it was okay. I think I was just so confused what was going on. I'm not gonna lie. Then I picked up The Red Scholar's Wake, and this is my favorite book of the month. This is another queer sci-fi, this one from Illumicrate, so it is a gorgeous edition. So it's one of those ones that I really hope that I would love, just because I want the pretty cover on my shelves. But as we get through the rest of these, that doesn't guarantee a spot on my shelves. This is weird. This is a very weird book. It's an Asian queer normative futuristic science fiction world, where you have a society that is very repressive, and then you have these pirates that are kind of working against the system, but also are violent and have their own problems. This book is weird because AI is like normative, and so you have ships that are humanoid creatures, or characters I should say, in this novel, and the main relationship is sapphic, but it's sapphic between a human and a ship. And that's weird. I don't know if that could ever not be weird. And instead of like humanoid bodies, like ships having like their AI personality in a humanoid body, they have it in like robots with the human body hollow projected over it, and then humans also have robots that kind of hollow project over their physical image. And so there's this interconnectedness of like physical and holographic that work in every aspect of this world, including like just decorations of the ship. It is fantastic and wild how this all works. I will tell you right now, I do not think this book is for everyone. I think there's a good portion of people that will pick this up and despise every aspect of it. And while I was trying to describe what it was like to my kid, I just laughed the whole time because it's just so wild. But I loved it. I adored it. It was just a fantastic wild ride that my mind just like sunk into, and was just so different, I think, than everything I was picking up. And I also really like this kind of genre of science fiction, which is still kind of wild to me that I do. But I would say it's kind of compared to like the Ancillary series, but also different. But if you like that, then I think you would enjoy this. Potentially Murder Bots as well, but has a different vibe to it than Murderbot's. But it's just, I adored it. And I respect it for what it is, and I respect anyone who doesn't agree with my opinion, but favorite book of the month by a long shot. Alright, then I picked up My Hero Academia number 3, and this I think is when I started venting to my kids about what the heck is going on. We're in a sports tournament, and at this point, and they are just competing to be the best of the best in the school. This was kind of just a whatever one. But I think this is the volume where I was complaining about there being like no backgrounds. So how was I supposed to know what was actually going on if I hadn't actually known about the anime for my kid? I haven't sat down and watched the whole anime, but I've seen enough of it as they're watching to kind of have an idea. But like the quirks that each character has, I was so confused on, and it's just very confused. But I did persevere because I promised them that I would. And in that same thing of reading what they have read, I picked up Creepy Cat, and I enjoyed this one. So this book is mostly pictures with just a very bit of dialogue, and it's about a gothic, our gothic main character who gets this creepy cat, and then, after inheriting a creepy mansion, I think. And this cat does some very wild things, but intermixed with all like the gothic vibes of it is just like cat humor. And if you own a cat, like, you get it. And it's just hilarious. And I think that's why I enjoyed it, is because, you know, having 2 cats, like some of the things that explained, it was just like, yeah, that's funny, our cats do that. And just the relatability of it. I also I tend to like this non-horror gothic vibe a lot, and so I think I enjoyed it more. And so yeah, I really enjoyed this. If the kid decides to pick up more volumes of it, I will happily read along with them, because it was just fun. Then I finally picked up Fire Becomes Her, and this is a book that is an Arrow Ace staple. Like, if you ask for Arrow Ace book recommendations, The Fire Becomes Her is one of the most recommended book in my opinion. And I started it and felt like I was in the world of Korra Avatar series, with that blend of steampunk and magic, and it had that very strong vibes. And then halfway, and a heavy relationship, and I was very confused why this is an Arrow Ace recommendation at that point. Then halfway in the novel completely switches, and it becomes a completely different book. And then I start understanding, like, the Arrow Ace recommendations, there's trans representation in it, and it becomes about a story of redemption and just more political. And I understand then why it was a recommendation, and I get why some people really enjoy it. It was not something that I related to. It's YA, I'm pretty sure, but I would say it's probably closer to new adult, because you have someone who's exiting college and doing an internship in the real world, and so it becomes about adulthood and independence and making good decisions for your future based upon, like, where you came from. And that itself, to me, is not really a YA topic. It's more like a new age topic, or new adults, not new age, sorry, new adult topic. Because, you know, as you're coming into adulthood, that's really the theme of this book. I'm very much past that point in my life, so even though it was new adults, I still didn't really resonate with the theme per se. But then it also has like a YA formula for writing, except for this weird switch in the middle of the novel. And then, I don't know, I don't appreciate the inconsistency in it. I do feel like there's just 2 different books in here, and there's 2 different vibes, the first half and the second half. And I think that could have been fleshed out a little bit. So I appreciate everyone that really enjoys this book, but this is definitely not a staple for my Arrow Ace identity. I'm still seeking a lot more adult versions, I think. That being said, I am glad that I finally picked it up. Then I realized that I own the 4th book in Patricia Briggs' Alpha and Omega series on audio. So I'd stopped reading up to the 3rd book in a series because that's what I own in ebook. And then on the 4th book, I realized I owned it in Audible. And so I picked it up for a reread. And this is just... to me, this is just a relaxing read. This is one of the urban fantasy series I read during grad school when I was single parenting 3 kids. And so I would pick these up when I just needed to like de-stress. And so I needed to de-stress. And so I went to back to this series. This is as far as I've read in the series at this point, and I think there's 2 more books. 2 or 3, but I think there's 2 more books that I haven't read after this, because I think it goes up to 6, but I do not own them, and so I need to wait until after the Read What You Own challenge to pick them up. Although I'll probably pick them up from the library, I want everything I'm reading to count towards finishing that challenge, because I'm done with it. I want to be done with it, maybe the better way of putting it. And then I read Grave Maidens via audiobook. This is another very YA series. I actually was surprised I finished it, but I mean, I remember the ending now that I remember that I finished the book. It is extremely YA fantasy, and if you enjoy YA fantasy, then I highly recommend that you pick up this series and probably go on to the 2nd book as well. Although I'm not going to. I mean, I've said this many times. I have an overabundance of YA on the shelf, and I'm just not at that point in my life where they resonate with me. And after reading so many of them, I don't need the familiarity of the storyline or appreciate the familiarity of the storyline. And that's valid as much as it's valid that people do enjoy that, no matter their age. So I think Grave Maidens is a great YA fantasy. I did not resonate with it. That's nothing on the book at all. I think if you like YA fantasy, you should absolutely pick up probably this duology. But it wasn't for me at all. I do appreciate, the one thing I really do appreciate about this book is that while there is like this romance going on, it is not the main point of this book. It might become more so in the 2nd one, but I'm not sure. I like how it's more about the main character and the main character's family and self-identity, and whilst this interest is still there, it's not all consuming, and I wish more YA was like that, because I think, especially when you're younger, it's important to still so focus on who you are as a person, since you're still uncovering your own identity, and to have that reflected more, that you can have your own identity separate from somebody else, I wish was seen more. And from my perspective, like, I wish I would have seen more without, like, even the romance being a thing, so that, like, I knew that that was an option. But I think for everyone else, this is a really good portrayal, because while there is still that love interest and that romance and figuring out that, there's the focus on self and focus on the main character and who she wants to be and how she can help her family, and I loved the aspect of it a lot. But I will not be continuing on with the series. And again, nothing to do with the series, but my own personal preference. And then I finally picked up King of Scars. This is my over 500 page book. And it's continuing on with Leigh Bardugo's Grisha series. This is like the 3rd part of the series. Not the 3rd book, but like the 3rd part. So you have the first trilogy, and then you have the Six of Crows duology, and then you have this next part of it. And I didn't really look too hard into this book when I ended up probably 2 years ago now buying everything in the series that I didn't own so that I could read it. And I just assumed that we'd be getting new characters in this next installment of the series. And we do not. We're revisiting characters from both the previous books and kind of meshing them together. And I wasn't expecting that, and that was interesting. But I think it's almost like the novel itself is kind of stagnant. It's because we don't really have something really new to push it forward. And it definitely did not need to be 500 pages. Absolutely not. It could have been a lot shorter, and we would have had the same, if not a better, punch to it. I mean, I will still be finishing the series, and I do own the next book, and if Leigh Bardugo releases more out in the series, I will read them. I really enjoy Leigh Bardugo's writing, and I'm really glad that she has the adult series, because I like that one a lot more. Even though there's really not an age gap between the characters, there's just a slight difference in how she's approaching the narration, and I think that's really the switch between YA and adult in her writing. I probably, though, am going to be unhauling this series from my physical shelves. Again, I enjoy the series, I enjoy the world, but I don't know if I need them actually taking up space on my shelves. And I will be continuing with the other book that I own as well. So, nothing on the series. It's just I'm running out of space, and I don't know if I necessarily need this in physical, you know? Then I started my Ursula K. Le Guin journey for 2024 with the first book in the Earthsea series. I'm not going to hold that up the whole time because it is very heavy. I actually am reading this via ebook. The first one I owned in ebook. This is I think it's classified as a middle grade, but it's like one of the first YA science fiction series that was written. And we started out this book with our main character, Geb, I believe. And we start with the poor, powerless, motherless figure that's going to become this great, amazing wizard and start his journey and see all why he's so imperfect. And I really did not enjoy this first book. The writing was okay. I don't even think the writing itself was perfectly, was amazing. It was just okay. And Gibbs okay, but he's not anything we hadn't seen before. And the female representation in this book is horrible and stereotypical. We only have 4 females really in this book, and they all kind of feel like this role. So the mother died very early, so there's no strong maternal figure. He does have an aunt who is the one that first introduces him to magic, but she's not very nice to him or very nice in general, and it's almost like this wicked stepmother kind of role that she is fulfilling, where she is mean to him and kind of pushes him out on a journey. She's not quite as mean, and she's slightly maternal, but still not really positive female rep. And then he meets someone his own age that is a sorceress, who is the temptress in the novel, so the female temptress, and she comes back in the story at some point. And then we have another passing female character, because Geb goes to magic school, and the magic school is all male. Apparently there are no female wizards, or so far there's been no mention of a female wizard. And so one of the high prince, people brings his wife, and she is absolutely a trophy wife with very beautiful and no intelligence. And then the last female character we get is the sister of someone, and she's like the only female character that is like positive. But while she's having like a great conversation with Geb about magic and life and like all answering all these interesting questions, she's getting portrayed as stupid. And it's like, okay, so you finally have this great character and who is extremely intelligent, and she gets brushed off as being stupid. And it irked me to no end, and I was about ready to call it then. I'm not gonna lie. But I'd made this promise, and there's something supposed to be amazing about the series, so I decided to push on. And I'm glad I did, but I will talk about that in a minute. But yeah, if you start the series and you don't enjoy the first book, I would definitely suggest you pushing past it, because it's probably going to be one of my least favorite Ursula K. Le Guin books. So after that, I read the 4th volume of My Hero Academia, and I actually enjoyed this one. I think I'm starting to become familiar with the characters, and I have to say, I think there's like more like background built into the art of this one, so that I had more context for what was going on. We're still in this tournament, and they're still going against each other, so it's definitely still that YA, draw everything out as long as possible. Not YA, but anime, draw things out as long as possible. But I definitely enjoy it more. Oh, the one thing I will say, I think why I didn't like volume 2 is because like the author comes out and says he's a pervert and like created characters that are pervert, and I'm like, are you kidding me? But it's kind of toning down by the 4th one. There's still this one character that's really annoying, but this joy and hyper masculinity and grossness against women, it is chilling down a little bit. I would not have read this far if it was not for my kid, and we've had conversations and they recognize some aspects of it, but I think having started with the anime, that may be a little less apparent there than the manga, where the author just comes right out and says, hey, I'm a pervert. I don't know, maybe it didn't translate well. It definitely is not a great thing to say in English. Anyways, I did it. I will continue on. I think I have to get to volume 7 to actually catch up to where my kid is, so expect more reviews of My Hero Academia. And then my last finished book of January is the 2nd book in the Earthsea series. The series itself has 6 books in it, so third of the way through now, and the 2nd book is fantastic. So we start with a brand new character who is female, and we're in this entire other section of the world that we'd only heard hinted out before, and it's a very it's a culture that worships darkness, and we have a priestess of, or the ultimate priestess of this religion of darkness, and so we see the world through her POV, and it was fantastic. Very complicated characters, very complicated main character. We do have Geb come back in. I hope I'm remembering his name right, because that would be embarrassing if I wasn't. We have him come back into the novel, but he doesn't become like this savior role. It becomes a play in between the two of them, and I read the afterword by Ursula K. Le Guin, and where she talks about like wanting to balance out the genders and show that like they need each other to survive. And being agender non-binary, I don't necessarily agree completely with that analysis of gender, because I'm excluded from it, but I do think that it is a better representation of gender, that it is a very important conversation about gender. It was done very well, and especially since, again, we're still probably late 60s, early 70s with this novel, a very poignant conversation to be having about gender at that time, and I really, really appreciate that, and vastly different than the first novel. I did forget to say that in the first novel, while I had a huge issue with how gender was represented, Ursula K. Le Guin, I think, was trying to also make a point about like race and culture, where we have a main character who has light brown skin, and then his best friend has dark brown skin, and so having a like the hero of the story, of a science fiction story, be not white, I think that was what she was focusing on more, and that's very important. But it also brings into question the fact that it took a white woman to like to make that point, and that itself brings in a whole other area of complexity. I don't think negativity, like negative, but it does. I do think it's something, could have a whole conversation about these two novels. Like I could be in school writing novels about the choices that Ursula K. Le Guin made as an author, which I think does speak volumes to why she is, you know, as well known as she is, with her being female being why she's not as well known as she is. But yes, the second book definitely made me a lot happier to be reading this series, and made me want to continue, now that I know that there's ties between the books, but we're not necessarily following all the same characters, and that we're not just going on the same journey of this kid growing into his powers. Because Geb is young adult at this point, I think, probably in his 20s. So while we're still, you know, we're still in YA young adult novels, our first main character is growing up, and so that's kind of cool to see. So I'm really excited about where the series goes. I actually have started the third book, and I think Ursula K. Le Guin has made better choices than the first one. So yeah, I will have a vlog for those two books coming soon. I think I actually am going to release it the next video after this one, so you can go check that out. And now, let's go over my DNFs. My first DNF of the month was This Close to Okay. This is one I was actually really excited to read because, you know, mental health, especially within, you know, Black African-American populations, is not something that is talked about a lot, but I don't think this was done very well. We start off with a person who is trying to commit suicide. The book's very apparent about that. But what happened after that, I think, is a violation of like ethics for clinical psychologists, if they were to do what they were going to do. If this is kind of building into sort of a relationship based upon a suicide, it's kind of like, I was very uncomfortable with the way that the story was going. She should have gotten help, and not what she did, and I wasn't okay with that. There was also something else. Let me see, look at my review. Some other reason why I DNF'd it. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. So I didn't like the mental health rep. I didn't like how it was put. I think it was very unethical. But then also, this book was published, so it was Book of the Month, November 2022, or sorry, 2020 release. And where I finally just couldn't do it anymore was this entire section about the glory of Harry Potter. We're sitting down and reading the book specifically together and talking about how important they are and how great they are. And I just think that was a choice. Especially at this time period of when the book was published. I think that definitely was a choice, and I didn't want to read that or support that. And if it was like presented in a different way, like I kind of gloss over references to that series to some degree, but when it's so apparent and it's so idolizing an author that is so transphobic, and doesn't think I have the ability, like someone who says outright that I shouldn't exist or be alive, that I don't have a right to life, I'm not gonna support that. So that's ultimately why I DNF'd it, but I think there's a lot else that was handled inappropriately in this novel, and I don't see myself picking up any more books from this author again. And then I DNF'd The Sun in the Void, which made me very sad. I wanted to love this book so much. Let's see when I DNF'd it. I was only 14% of the way through the book. Nothing had happened at 14%. Nothing. And then there's this scene where our young main character just stayed and watched someone have sex. And I was done at that point. I did look at the reviews before I stopped, and there was nothing that made me want to continue with this series. If anything, it made me want to DNF it even more. But it's gorgeous, and I am sad about that, and maybe someone else will enjoy it more than I did, but it definitely was not for me. And the book that I am the most sad about DNFing is Infinity Alchemist by Casey Callender. So this author wrote Felix Ever After, which is a YA novel about a demi-male trans youth, and I just really resonated with that novel, even though, like, I read it at a period of time where I was transitioning, even though I was an adult, and it was just so well written and well presented. And this is their YA fantasy debut, and so I was so excited to pick this up. I DNF'd it as 66% of the way through the book. So another really great thing about this book I was looking forward to is there's a polyamorous relationship between three men. We have a trans man, three individuals. We have a trans man, we have a apparently cis male, and then we have someone who is genderqueer, where they actually change between male and female. So the wrap itself, I really enjoyed the trans wrap. The relationship between, well, the individual characters I enjoyed pretty well, but mostly I enjoyed the trans wrap. I enjoyed the idea of this relationship between the characters. It's not necessarily how it was executed up to 66% of the way through the book. I think the book focused more on the romance and the characters than on the actual plot of the book. The plot was really thin and not very well developed. The magic system in the world could have been so much more developed and presented so much more in depth instead of focusing so much on this relationship that then didn't pan out. This is one of the books that I would have been here for the relationship if it also, like, how it was written, and just like there was no chemistry between any of the characters at all, and it was like, oh. And then the pillar of why I could not continue with this book is because the author did not do the basics of research to figure out how to throw a punch. So they say that you should tuck your thumb into your fist to stop it from being broken. This will break your thumb. This is how you break your thumb. And I thought, okay, well, maybe they meant like this, maybe, but then there's other passages that no, they definitely meant this. You do this to get your thumb not broken. This is wrong. Very, very wrong. I will say, I do have a black belt in Taekwondo. I know, surprising, since I'm not the most athletic person in the world. But the very first lesson that a white belt or prospective white belt gets when they come to a martial arts class is how to throw a punch. Start, you just stick your thumb there, punch, right? There. Very first lesson. Don't tuck your thumb. Don't tuck your thumb. You put it here, and then you punch with the two parts of your knuckles. All this author had to do was take one martial arts class or Google, and they would have figured that out, but they didn't. Barest of research. And then I went through the editors, who nobody at Tor knows how to throw a punch. What the heck? One of the characters is the son of a general, and is in military school, and he's the one teaching how to throw a punch. And then congratulated them on throwing a punch. Dude would have broken his thumb. Like, how do you even, like, what the heck? I'm sorry. If you can't do the barest of research, then I don't have to sit and sludge through a bad book. And yes, I'm so sad to trash on this book because I wanted this to be fantastic. I reached out and asked for the arc, the physical arc for this book. I wanted to read it so bad, and no. Editors need to step up their game. Stop putting out books by big name authors where they're not putting in the time to make the books good. Editors are extremely important to the writing process. And come on, y'all. Come on. This isn't the first time that a book should have been amazing, and it wasn't. We know this author could write. They've written other fantastic books. But anyways, yeah. That obviously was a trigger for me. Okay, the next book I DNF'd is, I'm a lot less dramatic about it. It's River of Royal Blood. I DNF'd this at 8%. It's nothing on the book at all. The book is probably fantastic for the right audience. I just knew every trope that had come in at 8% was one I was not going to enjoy. And so I put it down. Especially after what I had already read this month. I didn't feel the need to go through a book that I knew was not going to be for me. Nothing on the writing style, nothing that happened in this book that I think was a negative. It's just like one sister out to battle another one trope, not feeling good enough. And I knew it was not going to resonate with me. And so I put it down. I'm sure this will find the correct home for somebody who will love it when I give them, you know, this fantastic copy, but just not for me. And then Goddess in the Machine. I DNF'd this at, let me double check. Yeah, exactly 50%. I was so excited when I started this book. I did start it via audiobook, and it was just so fresh for a YA book. It's science fiction. Our main character gets frozen and sent on a colony ship to another planet, but then gets woken up in the future where she is a goddess because so much time has passed that they don't understand the technology that they have, and it was just such an interesting concept. The dialect changed in the novel to kind of express the passage of time. I think the dialogue itself was easy enough to understand of what had changed by showing this depiction. I think it's a bold move by an author in any novel. You have to be able to make sure you can pull it off. I had no problem with it personally. When I went back through the reviews before I DNF'd it, other people did, but I think it was pretty well done. It showed the passage of time. It made the point that it was trying to make, and language would have changed over 1,000 years. So I think that choice itself was valid. I was really excited because this was just something different in YA and just something fresh, and I was here for the sci-fi element of it. I wanted it in for that, and by the time we reached 50% of the book, it was completely gone. There was just this bad romance that just shouldn't be happening. All she could think about was this romance that actually wasn't happening, and it's just like, why am I here? There was just nothing keeping me in the story, and I did check the reviews before I decided to DNF, and decided that it wasn't gonna like switch back into the sci-fi part that I wanted. It could have, the science fiction aspect of it could have been so fantastic and so unique, and put this book in like a part all its own. Even if there's romance that made no sense was still part of that, if they hadn't lost focus, I think, on the science fiction aspect, it would have been a fantastic book. And I'm sure other people who appreciate, again, the YAS of it, still really, really enjoyed it. But what caught me in the beginning of the book is not what you get in the last half, and I don't think people that are going to enjoy the last half are going to enjoy the first half, and I think that could be a problem in this book gaining the readers that you need. That is it. This has been a long video, so hopefully I can edit it down quite a bit. That is my January haul. DNF 6 books. It just wasn't necessarily the month for me. I only had one really good read, and it's a very kind of disappointing start to the year. I'm very excited to finish the Read What You Own challenge because I need to spice up my reading journey. So that's all I can say. Alright, thank you for staying here this long. If you haven't, please like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And as always, keep reading, keep writing, and until next time.